to be working like that?
There was a reluctance to shoot the sets that happened to be ready, and a request was made for us to have the sets that were originally scheduled to be shot last ready first, which included the largest sets, i.e. the Colosseum and the Imperial Palace. This is the nature of epic filmmaking. So the decision was not to shoot any of those sets at all, but instead to shoot night sequences.
There was a lot of wear and tear, but Ridley was so unflappable in the center of that. And you might say he's the great multitasker. He was actually able to step outside, deal with the extras, the tigers, the logistics, the light, come back in, refocus on something he was going to shoot in 2 weeks, which was part of the end of the movie, with that kind of focus, and then step to the next problem, which was maybe a really pissed off actor who didn't understand why those lines that they were going to shoot in 3 hours had just been changed.
Like every time, we got a new rewrite, it was sort of like, no, Ridley, please tell him we want that back. Please, tell him we love that part and whatever. And he was so always trying, just always trying to make it happen.
With this big confrontation, it would be better that we have half armor rather than tapes.
It used to be the Carthage battle wasn't him revealing himself didn't follow the Carthage battle, right? And then we switched it. So now I can't wear the toga and then hack the statue into a completely different thing.
You always say that when you make movies that nice to have the script all tied up and locked off and ready to go before you step anywhere near, even on the first day. And that so rarely happens. In this instance, this was certainly not locked up the day before I got on the set. But I think what happens when that occurs is you really, really pay attention to everything that you're doing and every step you're taking. And the organic effect of decision now, what will that mean later? And I think what came out of it was what seemed to be a seamless movie. And mainly because, for the most part, there was, a few people really paying attention.
The most impressive part about Malta was that Ridley had done the inside of the palace completely differently from anyone else had done it. He'd done it almost like a cave. It was dark. Where the lamps had been burning, there would be ash on the walls that the slaves hadn't quite been able to get off, and you really had this oppressive feeling of being in a cave, and it probably was accurate.
Our palace, we'd come there in the morning, and we'd be halfway through makeup and costume, and there'd be nothing there. There'd just be like this extraordinary open halls that they had created, marble halls that were so beautiful, with light streaming in from the right sides. And then we'd say, so where would you like to enter? And where would you like to start the scene? How would you like to start it? And again, this freedom. And then when we came back, he would have arranged all of the furniture, all of the props to fit exactly what we had in mind when we were doing the scene.
The Colosseum set, as built by us, is a full-scale fragment of the original Colosseum, as close as we can reckon from research. It's an accurate reconstruction of the first tier only, and only about a third of that. It would have been 12 times bigger, 3 times as high, and 4 times as big around.
The movie was probably not makeable at a price with most filmmakers. Where Ridley's extraordinary is, well before we started shooting, Ridley had the whole movie in his head. So we started to look at creating the Colosseum, which of course we could only afford to do basically one side of it. Ridley was able to storyboard the whole movie such that he always knew which way he was facing. And he could always shoot into the one part of the stands that we built. And occasionally when you had to reverse, you could green screen and put something else in there. But you had to limit those shots because that becomes prohibitively expensive. The other challenge, of course, was you can't afford to have 50,000 extras. 5 is expensive, and we'd have occasionally days of 5,000 extras. And then you'd obviously have to design in advance the shot so you're shooting at your extras. And then, of course, you take plates of those extras and then you fill them in when you create the wider shots of the whole Coliseum.
Using models, Ridley, like looking down like for a model and for a thing, I remember watching them do it, going, "God, these blokes are cleverer than me." They constructed, well, we can build this, and we can shoot this way, and then we do cheated reverses all the time.
I could make this senator's box the double of the royal box, so when I'm in the royal box shooting, I can take the royal personage, Commodus, put him over here, and flop this and make this a senator's box. So I can flip-flop. I'm always doing that, cheating with sets. So I'm doubling the scale immediately. So we're cheating all over the place. And so you just get this impression of huge scale.
Flopping it around and cheating positions of people, so you look back into the section of the set we had. We'd change extras, and the Vestal Virgins would be here, so if we went back, no Vestal Virgins, there'd be non-virgins there. The Maltese are a fascinating nation. They're sort of a mixture of Italians, English, and Arabs, and we had this big set, and the first day with the extras, we thought, well, we've got everyone in, great, we've got 3,000 people, everyone's gone in, terrific, this has worked very well. We're all pleased with ourselves, then we say wrap, and then we had an absolute fucking riot on our hands. I mean, literally, Branko Lustig, the producer, and me were virtually fist-fighting people, trying to calm people down, because, they just went potty to get out and get back to get changed and get paid. And it's something that we really, we were surprised by the ferocity of these people and the wish of them to get out of it. So after that, we had to do a new system where we had to put a complete security, like a stadium system, and almost empty the stadium. We'd have to call which section were emptied and have to, virtually secure the people in their seats. They wouldn't rush out.
Controlling the light then became hard because you're front lit all the time and be terrible. So I could build canopies over the royal box, that's cool, and the senator's box, that's cool. But the big trick, which I think was the best trick, was we got into, John Matheson got into, he said, how the hell do we make the shadow? Or does that mean I'm going to have to digitally window everything and digitally grade everything afterwards? Now there's going to be a lot of shots, so we can't afford it. So what we did is we found the cost of an actual velarium from these sailmakers.
The velarium being the giant fabric roof that historians believe, archaeological historians believe, was covering the entire Colosseum to provide shade from the intense sunlight of the Roman summer. These sailcloths were manipulated by members of the Roman Navy on ropes and pulleys, much like the sails of their triremes, only horizontally rigged, to adjust to the changing conditions of the sun. We did exactly that. John Matheson arranged for a British company of engineers to come out and engineer a system with about 17 sails on masts, which were built into the existing set. This was quite a challenge, as the site we were on was one of the windiest on the island, of course. And we were building in what they all told us was the windiest winter in 30 years. We had typhoons on a regular basis and hailstones as big as golf balls several times.
In fact, initially when we first went in there, we lost half the set. First week, in February, went bam, knocked us flat. But the velarium was brilliant in that because of the front light coming up on the stands like that, over here and coming around most of the day, you've got this wonderfully hard shadow. That's the sun. You got this shadow, but hard light because the sun is a trillion miles away. You get this beautiful hard shadow on the crowd, which moves all the time. So that looked great. And I had to make the Colosseum also 10% shorter, which is dodgy, because I'm going to have galloping horses in there. And whilst it may look big, you get a horse up to speed and they're going a flying gallop. I don't mean a canter, an absolutely flying gallop. You need a lot of land, a lot of ground. And so you've got to allow for rein-in time and turn time, particularly on chariots. So we were always right on the edge, and one of my anxiety was that the chariots would never get up to full speed. which they didn't. They looked like they did, but they weren't really full speed, because you had time for a runoff. At the end, there was no runoff. That was a confined space.
The Colosseum had all sorts of games, from naval battles to reconstructions of famous historical battles. We're doing the Battle of Carthage in one of our scenes. The heroes of Rome fight from chariots against really the friends of Hannibal, who are reenacting a famous triumph.
It translates to a battle between Hannibal's barbarians, the barbarian horde, and the legionnaires of Scipio Africanus. So they are all on chariots, and they're all furiously surprised by the ability of the barbarians to at least hold their own.
We were looking for how to create excitement for our own purposes. We've decided to introduce chariots into the arena, although originally most familiar to moviegoers would have been Ben-Hur, which would have occurred in the Circus Maximus, which is where chariot racing took place. What we're doing is chariot battling within the arena as part of a gladiatorial competition.
Russell likes to do a lot of his own stuff. He wanted to do a jump, and he wanted to do this on the horse, and it's on hard sand, and if he'd taken a clip and gone down, you know, we're at the end of the movie. It doesn't make sense at certain points to say, you love to do it, you're a good horseman, you want to do it, but at certain moments it's just not worth risking when we've come so far.
I remember the happiest I think I ever saw Russell Crowe is when he was working with horses in the Colosseum with the stunt guys, and he wanted to show this move that he had figured out. In other words, he threw himself into that aspect to it and loved that aspect to it. So with Russell, it is, sure, I think he felt the burden and the pressure and the challenge of carrying this movie on his shoulders as an actor, but he also felt very connected to what the movie was as a story.
I cut a horse free off one of the chariots, pull a spear out of the ground, throw the spear at a standing gallop, catch a spinning sword through the air, also to standing gallop, wheel the horse, and jump over the blades that are coming out from the wheels of the chariots while decapitating one of the drivers. And these are 100% stunts.
He's so much into doing it right and doing it, you know, as perfect as, you know, getting the perfect shot and giving the best performance, that he cares as much about his co-actors looking as good and, you know, doing as, you know, as good.
Whatever comes out of these gates, we've got a better chance of surviving if we work together.
Roll the cameras!
When you look at the set and, you know, the crowd and whatever goes with it, you know, there's not much you need to bring the emotions out and to be there as a gladiator.
And every now and then I'll, you know, acknowledge the crowds that we're using in such a way, but simply to help the scene that's going on, you know? And I don't know, to me it's just part of the full experience of the character.
Anybody a Manchester United fan? Put a bit of that juice into the cheering. And background action!
Initially, I think you're like, who am I kidding? I'm from Florida. I'm gonna walk out and wave. But ultimately, I think it's what they must have experienced, what communists must have experienced then is the energy of the crowd and people responding to you. Simply one wave and the screams go up, and there's a certain sense of power that comes with that.
No, it's dangerous stuff. I mean, if you see the carriage coming out there and you jump over, I mean, they're not able to stop. You know, we don't have ABS, you know. It's nothing. I mean, they run. And if you're not on the right spot where you have to be, you can get hurt.
74 take one, see camera mark.
We were lucky because, yeah, you can easily have an accident, a broken leg, a broken back. I think it's all about very tight rehearsal, and nobody's allowed to rehearse off on the side. They've got to rehearse under supervision because it's all to do with choreography, you know. And I think we built up a good team of stuntmen who were, half of them were gladiators, really. And, you know, part of the process on that is that they also have a lot of patience because they've got to sit around for months waiting to come and do their thing. And those guys would range from being German troops or Roman troops who take a bashing in Germany, then we use them again redressed and reconformed in North Africa, and then if we're not starting to recognize them too much, reconformed once again in Rome. And a good stuntman, good, you know, like a great stunt coordinator is totally important. Saves people's necks. But a good stuntman is invaluable because he sees that accidents don't happen and that also it looks good. The tigers with tiger in the arena would be tricky because, again, a tiger is not trainable at all, really. So you're standing there with a very dodgy animal, which is 11 feet from, about 800 pounds, 11 feet from nose to tail. The thing you must always remember is a tiger like that moves as fast as a house cat. And when it's lying on the ground and you're thinking, why doesn't it do something? That's a good place to have it. When it's, you know, because it's very quick and very, 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 very aggressive.
Ridley's very different. He's very visual. You know, we get storyboards all the time, and everything's pretty well laid out as to what he wants to see. But this particular movie, the animals aren't only the tiger sequence, where there was a lot of stuff. Normally the animals are just in cages. It's just the one thing that he stresses, he wanted the tiger fight to be very violent.
He's in a battle with 4 Bengal tigers, well, on chains, but if you've got 4 tigers on chains, you keep letting the chain out, the arena gets smaller and smaller because there's 2 of you in the middle of it.
One fight sequence alone that we just did the other week was 80 moves, 80 sword moves, regardless of the fact you're getting your ass swiped at by tigers.
They shot that scene over a period of about 3 weeks. Obviously, they had difficulty with, you know, tigers cooperating and doing what they wanted to do. They had the whole sequence storyboarded, you know, about how Maximus is fighting Tigris and how Commodus has obviously, you know, set the game in order to defeat him and, you know, letting the tigers come towards Maximus or pulling it back when, you know, Tigris was in danger.
The ideal thing for me to have got from, we've got one shot when we come out of the hole, drives them across to here. We haven't got that yet, right?
We're doing it now.
Now, all that will work easily by my coverage on what I call the teams on the chains. Just letting it out.
We had several bad days because I think just the way the scene is set up and the way it's meant to be shot, it was very, very hard to get the actors close enough to the tigers and still be safe.
Obviously, we could do a huge, expensive visual effects shot and do that. Because we don't have the tigers, we don't have the crowd, we don't have the set. But with one visual effects shot with them fighting, and maybe abandon all the others and do one spectacular one here. Fight, let them go with the Vista Vision, bring them round. You could add everything you wanted, add the tigers, add everything. It may be fucking expensive, but it may, Branko's a bit close, but we may be able to trade one or two.
Since the tiger weren't doing what they were supposed to do, and we had to try to tell the idea of what the battle is like, it was hard in terms of structuring it and not having all the pieces necessary to do that.
Get her in, get the chain on her, get Randy positioned. It gives her too much time to tear at the camera.
If we put a...
you can put a crash box or something on there.
But this, another...
Yeah, just put a box over it, then it's not a problem. When the door goes down, you even see the door fall, she goes. This movie being made totally in Europe, obviously in England and Morocco and in Malta, the animals had to come from this part of the world because it's prohibitive to bring them from the States, which is where I'm from. So consequently, you know, there are a lot of different problems just finding people and animals that are movie-worthy and available.
We had these trained tigers from Paris in France. The problem with the tigers, I think to remember, was the fact that, you know, they'd be sitting there going, cool, these tigers are not doing too much, are they? You know, and we're watching them, and then one day one of the tigers just turned around and tried to chase after the chainman, and that fucking changed our tune a bit when we saw that happen.
All those kinds of animals are particularly dangerous. You know, they all will grab people, and anytime you come on a crew, you have to educate the crew about staying away from the stuff and not having them getting grabbed.
I was drawn to those animals. Just like fascinated by them. Lions and tigers. Pretty special.
I tell people working with animals is a lot like driving very fast. You know, as long as you concentrate and you're real careful, you shouldn't have a problem, but you can always end up off the road. And it's the same with the tigers and the lions. I mean, they always will grab you. The only predictability is the unpredictability, and I think people forget that. When they see the lions and tigers, you know, our job is to make them look tame and quiet, and in reality, they're not.
It shouldn't have been dangerous at all, and it was incredibly dangerous. And there was only, do we tell Russell a few days later that there was one day where you could actually see in the camera that they had slightly misjudged in Russell's scene with the tiger, and the tiger swiped out a paw, you know, that could really do 100 stitches down your back quickly, and it missed Russell by about 6 inches.
You have close calls all the time that people aren't even aware of, where they'll pick something out and want to go after it. And, you know, you just have to be very careful. Children are always a problem on a set, especially a set like this, because, you know, the lions and tigers always want to get a hold of kids, just to scarf them.
One day I brought one of my kids to the set in Malta, and they said, please keep the kid out of the eye line of the tiger, because anything that bite-size agitates the animal. You know, you just become aware that you are dealing with very dangerous animals.
Sled Reynolds told me this great line about animals. Sled Reynolds is the animal trainer in Gladiator. He had a great name, and he's a great trainer. And he said, he goes, John, animals don't act. They are. You know, so if a tiger looks pissed off, it's not like he's acting pissed off. He's really pissed off.
They don't act. So if they act mad, they are mad. So you have to be very, very careful putting the actors in their close proximity.
Really, if you got hit by a tiger, it can break your neck without even clawing you. I mean, it's got enough force from just in fact, that's how they kill their prey, is the force just basically breaks bones in their body, you know what I mean? And they're disabled, and they just come in and bite your neck until you're dead.
And then we had a guy called Brandy, I think was a tiger guy, and he sort of wrestled with a tiger, got dressed up as Russell, and had a fight with the tiger.
He could train it to a certain extent to jump on him, receive food, and then that was it. Then you had to get it off. Once he's got the food, you've got to get rid of it. And because it would go after the food in his hand, so he would let this tiger jump on it. We actually, I guess, successfully struggled through all those bits, and that's what it is, bit by bit by bit, with a little bit of CGI. Not as much CGI as you imagine.
What we would do is we would shoot Russell and Sven and try to get a performance out of the tiger as best we could within safety reasons. And then we would go back and those things, it was actually very interesting. That we were shooting in Malta, the film was being souped in London at Technicolor. But the digital video tap would go to Pietro that night. He'd cut it together that night, call me up the next day and say, okay, John, here's a laundry list of the tiger shots I need more Jeopardy on.
We realized that there was a lot of pieces that I